I need to make sure that I'm sharing my screen here. Which one is the one that I want to share? That one. All right. Okay, I am sharing. We are recording. So welcome everybody to the virtual brown bag. As usual, we go through an introduction because sometimes, people will be watching this later and they have no idea what these meetings are about. So that's why we always make that clear. So for one thing, yes, we are recording, and since we encourage people to share things here, always be aware of what you are sharing, just to make sure you're not, share things that could cause you any kind of trouble with your clients or employers. So keep that in mind. What is the virtual brown bag thing? Well, it's a place where we get together every week. We share tips and tricks, things we've learned the hard way, experiences, maybe frustrations or difficulties. Actually, I'm going to share one frustration that I've been having here recently, and maybe somebody has gone through that and knows ways around it that I don't. So don't be shy of, just picking up. Logistics, we do this again every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. Everybody is more than welcome to just join in. So spread the word. If you like what you see here, just make sure that other people know about it as well. Here's a small list. Actually, it's a long list, but it's a partial list of things that we've shared before. So if you feel like, well, I don't know if this is worth sharing, well, just look at this list. What's up, George? Right, so don't be shy, sharing whatever it is, whether it's like some exotic language that you're experimenting with, or approaches to software development, or even like self-organization, whatever it is, bring it up. It may be interesting to more people. And my mouse is frozen. Here we go. We have the virtualbrownbag.com website, where you can always find the link to this Skype meeting up at the top. As well, if you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to find links to the videos for the previous meetings with a little blurb as to, what have we talked about in those meetings. So check it out. And all right, so let's get rolling. So my friend Tony was just starting to share a story with us, and I said, hold on, if you don't mind, share with the rest of the group as we get things started, because I like hearing stories like that, and again, it can be beneficial to others to hear it too. So Tony, if you don't mind, man.
Okay, so I'm looking for a job, as I'm sure everybody knows now. So I talked to this company last Wednesday about a job, and I had a conversation with a couple of the partners of the company, and at the end of the conversation, they decided I didn't have enough technical project management experience, which is fair. I haven't been on that side of the house ever. I've been more on the development side. So later that day, I have another old coworker of mine reaches out to me about an opportunity that he knew somebody was looking for, and then I remember the conversation I had with this company earlier that Wednesday, and I basically connected him with that particular company. The next day, he has an interview with those partners. Then on that Friday, he has an interview with a client, and Wednesday he started with that company. And so he was out of work for 2 days because he rolled off his last client on Friday. So so the whole thing is, that's the closest I've been to getting a job since March.
And
Yeah.
So, but the other thing is another kind of thing. I'm not just when I'm looking for a job, I'm not just trying to help myself to find a job. I'm trying to help other people that need it, right? So in the case of like what I did for this guy, I connected him up with a company that I knew that was looking for his skill set, right? So that appears to have worked out. And then I had another. I went to a kind of a online job fair last week too, and I actually ended up talking to one of my old bosses from a few employers ago, and they were the only employer looking for people at that event. And so word got around to some of the other people that were there that I had worked with that company. And so I was able to kind of provide them some information about that particular employer, you know. So, you know, just I think if you're just trying to only help yourself, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. But I think helping others is a good thing to do.
Tony, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative that you shared that story. And I mean, I could not agree more. I always think back in 1997, I think. It was when I first started looking into Foxborough at the time. I got this new job. I'm coming from Clipper, from DBase and all that, so X-based languages. And then I get this job where they are using Foxborough, which I had no experience with. So I'm like, you know, just trying to catch up and learning whatever I can to, you know, get started. And then I get involved with a community, the Foxborough community back in Brazil at the time. And there was this one guy that's he introduced himself, and then he said, "Hey, I understand you are trying to catch up, and you need some literature and some help. Can we get together for lunch? You know, I'd like to meet you in person, and also, you know, bring some books for you." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." It's like, who's this guy, right? But whatever, let's do some networking. So, you know, he buys me lunch. He brings me like half a dozen books on Foxborough, and he says, "Here, just take it." I'm like, "No, I'm just borrowing." He's like, "No, I know the content of those books. I've used enough. I have actually multiple copies. These are just for you." And I said, "Well, why are you doing that? You don't even know me, right? You know like my name from like online forums at the time." And he said, "Well, the way I see life is the following. If I just get everything for me, right, and it's all about me, that does not really help as much if I help other people. If I help 10 other people, and when I need help, one out of those 10 actually extends a hand and help me out, I'm already like on the, you know, on the benefit side." And I will never forget that, because sure enough, like several months down the road, he actually needed help with something that he was working on, and I was able to help him out. And then he reminded me of that. He said, "You see, you know, you helped me when I needed, so just pay forward." And that was like part of like my own motivation to start just reaching out to the community, like giving talks, writing articles, and doing whatever to help out others, people that I don't know. Because again, as you spread all of that around, you get to know people, people get to know you. So instead of only you on the lookout for opportunities by yourself, you actually have more people who are also thinking, "Oh, yeah, I've heard that Tony is actually looking for work and he's experienced with X, Y, and Z," right? So now you're broadening your reach just because you've helped other people and they know about you, they know what you need, they know what you know, they know what you're looking for. It's to me, it's so gratifying. So thank you very much for sharing this. And, you know, really these like brown bags and things like that, this is the kind of thing that I have in mind. So thanks again, man. Appreciate it. And good luck on your, you know, your search. I'm pretty sure that's whatever is the best for you will come when it's time, you know, for sure. Because, you know, the kind of approach that you're taking, let me help out other people. How can I, you know, help out other people? And it's not just about me. That is a huge thing, at least in my book.
Hey, Tony, I don't think I saw. Did you put your resume in the Slack?
Did I put it like in the bag Slack?
Yeah.
No, but I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you aware, Tony, that's on the and some I should probably bring that up also more often, but we do have both a Twitter Virtual Brown Bag channel that we post things, and there is a Slack channel also that we can use to, like, when we have these conversations, if we want to, like, you know, just continue the conversation, or like, again, now that we know, you know, Tony is looking for work, you know, maybe he has a resume, well, just drop it over there. It's another way for us to stay connected and keep growing this this network. And the link to that Slack channel is up there on the website. Cool. All right. All right, so I have a couple of things to share here. One is, and another reason why I love the virtual brown bag, right? So several brown bags ago, like in between, as we're going between topics, George says something like, oh yeah, and by the way, Claudio, you know, we've been talking about taking notes and whatever. I have something that I think you're gonna really like. And then he talked to us really quickly about the Rocketbook, which is a reusable notebook, right? What do we mean by that? You can essentially write, right? So it comes with this pen, which is really not a special pen. It's what is it called? A friction ball pen, right? That is erasable, right? So you can write on this notebook, and then you can erase it with the other end of the thing. It runs very smoothly. I love writing with this thing. And the kind of paper that they have, you can, you know, once you're done with it, you can use this little felt to just, you know, you get it a little bit wet, and you can pretty much like wipe it out like that. So what I do is I keep like my own notebook here with me all day, and then I keep taking notes. And then after a couple of days, I fill up those pages. I'll scan those in. At the bottom of the page, there are some like icons that you can program on the app to say, well, for example, there's an apple, there is a diamond, there is a four-leaf clover. So you can program the app where you say, well, when I scan something in and I've checked on that apple, it should send that scanned image wherever I've programmed the app to. So it could be to an email, to a specific email. It could be to a Google Drive spot, or to a Dropbox spot, or like in my case, I use a lot Evernote, so I can say, well, send it to this notebook in Evernote, or to this other notebook, so it goes straight where it has to go. It also does some smart things, like at the top of the page, I normally put like double hashtag, whatever title I want, and then double hashtag. And then the app uses that, it does some OCR, and it uses that as the title of, say, the email or the note that it creates in Evernote or in Dropbox or whatever. So it's one of those that, you know, George had just mentioned as this, oh, and by the way, and like, I grabbed that tip and I adopted. I've been using it for about a month. I'm really loving it. It's working great for me. And another thing that I've learned they have, so two other hints. One is the book that I got is one that's it's all dotted pages. They do have an option. It's called a Fusion, I think, which is more like, yeah, this one. It's like a planner where you have templates on the pages, like for your daily schedule, your monthly calendar, and things like that. And then, of course, you know, those are fixed on the page. An alternative to that, since those kinds of planners don't work well for me, I've tried them, but I use other approaches to it. But what you can do, if there is something that's you end up like drawing lines and you follow a certain pattern, you can use a Sharpie on these pages, right? So the Sharpies, you're not going to be able to wipe it out, so it's going to stay. And then you use the friction ball pen to write it, right? And then essentially reuse those templates. It's something to experiment with, and I like that tip. And another thing that I've learned from these guys is they have these beacons, right? So I do a lot of whiteboarding, and with these beacons, you can put them, right? So comes in set of 4s. You put it on your, let's see, this image should show nicely whenever it comes up. There you go. Right, you can put it on your board. You can delimit the area on your board that you want to capture, right? So it makes it easy for the app to detect the edges and snap the photo for you. So that's kind of cool. Also on the app, you can hit a button there, which is going to create a URL that you can share with other people, maybe your team that you're, having some sort of design session or whatever, right? And then when you snap a photo of your board using this app, it will automatically post it to this link. So this link will always show whatever last image you've taken from the board. So again, for collaboration, like online collaboration, virtual collaboration, like we are all going through these days, that's been helpful. I've been using that as well successfully. It's kind of cool, team likes it. So thanks, George. Another one of those. That's why I say nothing is too little for you to share here, because it may be very helpful to somebody else. As I use it so much, I ran out of ink on the pen that came with it real quick. So I found replacements or refills on Amazon. So like this, three packs, so 9 refills for about $10.
Be careful, because I ran into one recently. These I'm getting a lot of feedback from someone. I wonder if it's for me.
Okay.
There are people. Oh, now it's okay. There are ones that are selling on eBay where like the price is reasonable, but then you look at the shipping and handling, it's like $35.
So it was not the case on this one for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I got it on Amazon.
Keep an eye
Prime.
out.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Actually, when I looked for it, I found like from a bunch of different vendors. This one I found from, I think it was on a Rocketbooker website maybe, that some other user said, oh yeah, I found this one on Amazon and it's really good. So I said, okay, let me try that one. And I got it a couple of days ago. I didn't pay for shipping. It wasn't part of Prime. And the quality is great. I mean, it feels just like the one that came with the book. So it's working out well. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. All right, cool. So next on my list of things I wanted to share. So as I'm working on this Angular project now, coming from React before, in React projects for the tests, we were using Jest, right, by default. I got used to it. It's like, I don't think it's necessarily like the greatest, test framework I've worked with. But still, as I'm running through or working through some Angular tests, which uses by default Jasmine, I really quick got fed up with it, because I like the flow where I keep the terminal window and the IDE right open side by side or on different monitors. And then on the IDE, I'm working on my tests. And then I want to jump to the command line, to the terminal, and run just that one test that I'm working on, because I'm focused on that one thing, right? And with Jest, I would just say Jest running band, and then something that matches the file or the folder of things. Like, for example, if I'm working on the sales feature, I would just, type sales, and then it would run the tests in the files that match that. Or I could, of course, say sales service, sales component, sales whatever, and match down to that. Well, as it turns out, Jasmine does not support that. And I was beyond me. It's like, really? I cannot run just a single test in Jasmine? That is weird. So I looked up, apparently it was supposed to come in maybe Jasmine 2 or whatever. I found some reference that people were working on it, and it was supposed to come up in a new thing. Alper says, can you mark the test with dot only? So yes, there was, I found a way that, or a study of a way where you could change in the test file, put an extra like F or something like that. You had to change your it block or your describe block to indicate to Jasmine, just run that one. And that drove me nuts. It's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to change my test file to tell it, oh yeah, hey, whenever you're looking for tests, pick this one. No, I want to be very intentful. I want to go in the command line and say, these are the tests I want to run. It's like, that's, over the last like 15 years, that's pretty much how all test runners work, right, in the CLI. So I wanted to look for alternatives to that. So I found people complaining about that on the Jasmine GitHub and all that, and there's no solution for that I could find. But then I found this blog post where how to use Jest in Angular and make unit tests great again. So that's what I did. I followed what the guy talks about here, and I've run into the same things that he's complaining about, like the build times that are slow and recompiling often, does not work reliably. So I just replaced Jasmine with Jest. I did run into some. Yeah.
Wait, you replaced Jasmine with Jest, or the other way around? Because I thought you were on Jest already.
No, I was on Jasmine. So I was on Jest in React projects.
Oh, okay.
Right, and then when I jumped into an Angular project, that by default, people usually use Jasmine, right, and Protractor and all that, and Karma. And I said, okay, if I cannot run a single test in the command line, no good, right? So then I replaced Jasmine with Jest. I did run into some oddities because with the way TypeScript works, the way it needs to find out about types and things like that. So this article mentions some of those. Some of the others I had to find in Stack Overflows and things like that, where the way that Angular was loading the modules and discovering those modules, it was getting confused with things like that. So once I've run, one case that I remember is where you have the test bed for the Angular test, and then you have your imports and your declarations. We happen to have one test or a couple of tests in the project where the thing being declared is also loaded by one of the imports. So while it was working fine in Jasmine, Jest didn't like that. And the fix was simply to remove that from the declaration since it's already coming in as part of the import. So other than running into those, everything else is running fine. Once I got that in place, I also started looking at creating custom matchers. So before I get there, let me share something else here.
So Alper asked, by the way, and I had that question too. So when you said you couldn't run a specific test, were you not using dot only or something like that? Did you not look? Or you mean just launching it from the command line?
Launching from the command line.
Oh, okay.
Right, because I like being very specific. I don't like having, say, watchers that as I change the test file and I save it, it reruns the test. Because sometimes, even though I saved stuff, I haven't done all the changes. So it bugs me that it runs the thing out automatically and it may fail. And then it's distracting to me because I'm going to look and it's oh, yeah, I'm not done yet. Hold on. So I like being more proactive. It's okay, now I'm done with whatever I want to check out. Let me drop into the command line, rerun the test, which is usually, up arrow, enter. Okay, now, and I keep going back and forth. It's a typical TDD approach, right? Work with the test, run it, see the result, back to the code, change whatever you want to change, run the test again. This is just so much quicker as far as, what I've learned from the several years of doing and trying to, stick with working from the test standpoint first, right? So something else that came up, so let me get it on another screen here and move it over here. So something that I've been sharing with people on and off is, long time ago, I gave up on writing tests like this, right? I wrote tons, hundreds, maybe thousands of tests in this shape with the whole AAA arrange act assert, and then you have the setup with a bunch of mocking this, mock this, mock that, and then act and a lot of asserts. The point that I've been making to people is when we have tests like this, it tells us what we are testing, how we are testing it, but not why that feature is actually implemented. So shift it over to, given when thens, and of course, George's going to relate to that because, pretty much I started doing that back when we were looking at, what was the framework, Subspec in XUnit, right? Which would allow us to write the test somewhat like this.
I made that. Well, I didn't exactly. There was a demo of how to do stuff with Subspec. It was a demo of like how to put together your own framework, which they called Subspec, and then I built that out, and we used a version of that for a long time.
Very
and
true.
then I eventually moved, I think, to XBehave. Yeah.
Right. So yes, and so it comes from those days, because I remember back then we looked at alternatives. Like there was at the time, what was it, Machine Spec or something like that?
Yeah.
I remember
Spec.
there were some frameworks coming in leveraging what at the time was like new features in C#, like lambdas and things like that. And then when you looked at the test, it really bent the language to use lambdas and all that, which was a really, really cool way to look at it. But I remember at the time, several C# developers who were not used to like lambdas and the way that they looked, they're like, what the heck is going on here? This does not even look like the C# that I know. So we would spend a lot of time not only trying to sell people in behavior-driven development, test-first development, but also teaching them how to use these lambdas and things. So the entry barrier was so steep that people would just give up. It's like, oh, I'm not doing this testing because it's too hard. So George's approach with the sub spec, where essentially we would have something like it was a context, and then we would pass in like a string with our given, and then the implementation, when, then. That was a great approach. We've used that extensively at the project we were working at the time. Later, when I moved on to other projects, and we couldn't, we were not allowed to use, say, not just Subspec XUnit, right? We had to stick with, say, MS Test, which at the time was terrible, but at least I could write something like this, right? Where my given when thens, they're just gonna be methods. They're just regular C# methods. And then I've stuck with the, doing everything underscore, lowercase with the underscores to separate the words, which some people would say, well, but that looks like Ruby. And I would go like, I do not care. It looks like English to me, right? It looks like English sentences. And that's the whole thing. I wanted people to read the tests and actually get a gist of what's going on here and why those things are important, right? So once I've adopted this kind of approach, I haven't had trouble selling testing practices to C# developers, because they're like, oh yeah, okay, these are just regular methods, no big deal. So Alper says, I still cannot see why in this style. Really, you cannot see the why. You cannot, like, this is modeling the what we are building based off of the acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is the why of the scenarios that we have in the user story. So this quickly ties us back into the user story. Ultimately, the user story should have the ultimate why of the feature, right? And then a feature may have one or more scenarios, right, described as acceptance criteria. And the test that we're looking at here, it describes that scenario that ties us back to the user story, right? So for example, the why here, instead of having, like in this case, I have a bunch of mocks here, right? Why do I have those mocks? It does not really tell me. Something like here, it tells me, well, given the current user is a marketing manager, this is why we have those mocks, right? Given duplicate addresses exist, it tells us why do we have that setup. Does that make sense?
I would also say, like, these methods, as you build up more and more test cases, they end up pretty reusable.
Yes.
That's actually one of the like what's the opposite of a snow? Like, that's one of the ways that you know you're on the right track.
Right.
I will say, I don't always write a function for the assertion. Like, because a lot of times it's pretty straightforward. If it's complex,
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine, yeah, because I mean, even more so if we are using like should libraries, right, where you say this value should be this thing here, it's okay, right? It also looks like or it reads well. But on things like this, and I've done a lot of this in the past, right, where you have the setup of the test, there's a whole bunch of, mock this, mock that, return true, return false, return whatever. And then there's a new scenario that needs to be coded. What do? We copy that existing test, we paste it underneath, we change like one mock or another mock, and then we keep on going. And then you end up with this one test file that has 300 lines of code. 200 of those lines are just copy and paste setup. And then you have to read through the setup to see, okay, what's different? Oh, on the first one, we return a true for that mock. On the second one, we return false. Why? Why are we doing that? Why is that important? That's where I see the value of extracting those mocks. And instead of saying, oh yeah, mock this, mock that, actually the given, have it tell you why that mock exists. Well, that mock represents a user being a marketing manager. That mock represents, an order that does not exist for this customer. This is where the why comes in for this kind of thing. Because I've worked on some projects where I'm new to the project and the developers are complaining, oh yeah, the tests are brittle. I don't know how to work with it. We don't know what to do. So I looked into the test and I started saying, oh, I see that kind of pattern, right? Where the setups are getting nasty and nasty. So as I start refactoring, I will grab like, okay, there's these 3 lines related to one mock. I will extract that into a separate method and I'll name it given, right? And I'm gonna pretty much say given blah, given foo. I don't know. I'm gonna say given orange jelly with pineapple, right? And I'll do that so they can isolate everything and go down to like smaller chunks. And then I'll ask a developer who was there whenever those tests were written. I'll ask them to do a code review. They're going to look these methods. They're going to say, given orange pineapple jelly with whatever, what does that mean? And I say, okay, thank you very much. That's my point. You're going to have to look at the mocks being created and you tell me what that means, right? And they're going to go like, oh, crap. Yeah, I don't know. Hold on. And then it goes like, and then I have like my own fun seeing the developers talking about why do we have to set it up that way? And that's why I want to see like an English description as to why those mocks make any sense here. What do they represent in your system, right? So that's been very, very beneficial. And since I've been having a very good adoption from all the teams that I get into this kind of practice, I try to replicate this practice not only, in backend code, but also in front-end code, and now more recently in end-to-end tests. So that's where I come from, where like a couple of weeks ago, I started looking into Cypress.io to do some end-to-end tests, right? Which is not something I've done much myself. So, all right, I'm reading up online and I'm learning how to write tests in Cypress.io, right? And I see stuff like this, right? Yes, you can do your describe, you can do your it blocks, and then you can use the Cypress functions to navigate and automate the browser. All right, I'm seeing the same patterns of arrange, act, assert, and I'm already not liking it, right? It's like, okay, I want to do something different here, right? So one way, one of our guys at Improving came up with this little library to write React tests, right? Where you can have like, given this thing, when this other thing, then this other thing. I said, well, okay, I may be able to try that. Let me try it. But on an end-to-end test, you're not going to have like always this pattern, given, when, then. You're going to have given, when, then, right? Where you're going to have a workflow because this is an end-to-end test. It simulates from the user's perspective, what the user is going through to get something done. So this model would not help us in that sense. Another thing is that it bothered me a little bit that I'm seeing too many colons and curlies and, you know, and stuff like that, like too many symbols in the middle of the English. But one reason I like that approach is that it spits out in the Cypress.io test runner, when we run the tests, it spits out, you know, like the feature or the scenario that we're looking at and the given when then. So it gives me a little more about what's going on there, right? But that approach didn't work out well in Cypress. So I decided to fall back to my like C# way of doing this, which was, you know, I have my describe, I have my it, and then I create functions named after the acceptance criteria, because I get the acceptance criteria exactly like that from my user story. So I want to make that bleed into my tests, right? So going with this approach, it was better, right? But then showing this to another co-worker, he said, oh, we can do it slightly better. Hold on. And then he gave me something that looks like this, right? A little function that we decided to name acceptance criteria, right? And we just pass in an array with essentially the functions that we want to execute, named after our given when thens, right? And the way we've built that, so it reads like that, it reads like the acceptance criteria. The output in Cypress, it looks like this, right? Which I dig. And because of the way Cypress reports the steps, right? We've also made it also spit out, you know, the given and when and thens out of each step, so that if any of those steps fail, well, we see that in the test runner, right? It tells us what step failed. When we flip over to the test, well, we also read something that looks like the acceptance criteria. So we are thinking from the English first mentality going into the actual implementation. I see there's a comment here. This would make a great blog post for later reference. Oh, you bet. I'll definitely be putting that up in some write-ups. Thanks, Christopher.
You're so close to agreeing with the way that I like to do tests.
No, I understand with your flow, and actually, let me bring up that blog post of yours, because I understand what you are referring to, and I always, just for, if somebody later wants to check that out, is it still at the top of your blog thing? Do we find it that way?
Second or third.
Okay. Right there, yeah. Right. And I mean, again, and that's for Cypress, right? Because again, as we, and this is like where I believe George is coming from, like on this post, which is great. I've been recommending this post to a lot of people, right? Where you do go like when, then, where you do have a workflow, and really from like an end-to-end standpoint, absolutely, because that's really relaying what the user story is calling for. It's what the user expects when they're using your app. So totally. For the things like in unit tests, in certain integration tests on backend, then I do not foresee me going that route where we have when, then. It's more like, given this context, when this happens, then I should see this output, right? It's more like contained to that one block of something that we are implementing, right? And along those lines, if I go back, where are my notes? Here, I also started looking at some more custom test matchers in Jest. So let me show you where that comes from. Right here. So I also want to have something similar to the unit tests that we have in the Angular side, but I'm just learning the new Angular. I was more used to the Angular JS thing, so I'm learning how Angular tests go. So as I'm running through looking through some of the existing tests, I'm seeing things like this, right? And I'm like, okay, whenever I see code like this, regardless as what the language is or the framework, I immediately see ways to clean this up, right? So this is like several assertions at the bottom of a test. Problem with this approach, one is it's very tedious to read all of this repetition. Also, because of the way test runners work, if this line here fails, the other assertions are not going to run. So what happens is, well, okay, I've run the test, this line failed, I have to go fix, and then I have to rerun the test, and now it tells me that the next one is also failing. So you have to be going back and forth, going through the build, wait time and the test execution time to go like fixing one by one. That's extremely tedious. Instead, I look for opportunities to write something more like not this one, sorry, here we go, right, where I replace the whole thing there, and I think there's a better, yeah, like this, right, where instead of like being imperative, where I say this is how I want to assert, I actually want to declare what needs to be asserted. So in this case, I say, well, I expect this thing here to have form group properties with the following values. These are the properties and the underlying values that I want to check on. So the test is very clear, right? It's easy to read what I'm expecting. And should any of those fail, instead of having to go fail, fix, rerun, fail, fix, rerun, it runs through all of them, and then it reports back at once all of the things that it found that are wrong. And this thing here is implemented as a custom matcher in Jest, which I didn't know exactly how to write, so it's something I've learned just a couple of days ago. And what it does, should it find, again, an error or multiple errors, it combines those. So here it says, look, object is missing the expected properties, and it tells me property is missing, and then it lists the ones that are missing. And if it found properties, expected properties, but they have the wrong values, it reports it back in that way. Hey, look, this property I found, but we've received this value, but we expected this other value, right? So report it all at once. It's going to streamline this, run the test, work on the test, run the test, work on the test, this going back and forth. Any questions or comments on that?
I mean, just taking a step back to the previous stuff you were showing. The one thing I still don't see why you put everything in an it block as opposed to like appropriate, like describe as given
and I think we've ended. Hold on, I think the last incarnation looks more like this: describe, acceptance criteria. Describe, or in this case, it's just describe, acceptance criteria. Is this what you meant?
Is acceptance criteria like doing a two-string on the function and checking the first word of it and figuring out how to do that, or just running it?
It is pretty much running everything.
Okay, so with this test structure, which is Jasmine, Mocha, like given and when technically maps to describe block.
Right.
And then maps to an it block.
Correct.
So like what you could do inside of acceptance criteria is like grab the name of the function that's passed in, right? Because you have a reference to the function. You can grab its name. If it begins with given or when, you automatically wire it into a when block. Sure. And then if it's a then, you wire it. Because like what you could get then as a nice benefit is like that second one right there. That's really two tests because there's two assertions. And
what
that should be...
it's to test? It's testing a unit. Like this is the unit. Sure. We're expecting those two things.
Sure, but my point is, I get right. So yeah, I guess you could say it's a matter of how you would want to report it in your thing. Yeah, that's fair. You could get like you couldn't have it counted as two tests then. I don't know. I'm just saying that maps a little more naturally to what the framework intent is, and there's some niceties that come along with that, like the ability to nest further down the line if you wanted to, but I guess that might not be the biggest deal. Also, just as a minor thing, make it so it doesn't need the array brackets. Like if you remove the array,
Okay.
you don't need the array brackets. Just do all arguments.
Yeah. Let me take
Yeah.
note of that. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Yep.
I dig it. Yeah, and we are already also doing a toString on the functions because we use that to like spit out to the console, right? So that when Jest reports about the test it uses, given this thing here, when this thing here, so and then strips out the underscores and all that. So good point. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so that's what I had to share today. Oh, there's one more thing completely separate from this that is a frustration I wanted to share with you guys. So I've been mostly using the Mac, right, for the last 10 years or so. And one of the features that I really like about my Mac, even though it's this like 5-year-old Mac, is that hardly ever I restart it, right? I reboot this computer. When I do have to restart it, or if there's like an update that forces me to restart, for one thing, it asks me. It's nice about telling me, hey, there is this update. Do you want to restart it now, tonight, tomorrow, whatever? When it does restart, it brings up everything back where it was before, like all the apps and the files that I had open. Everything comes back where it was before. So I'm like, yeah, great. I cannot say the same thing about my brand new Surface laptop with Windows 10 Professional on it. The thing is very rude, right? Where even though I've configured it to not restart when there's an update, I tell it, hey, tell me when there's an update and let me decide when you're going to restart. No, it totally says, I don't care what you say, I'm just restarting. So that has been happening like every other day where it decides to install the update and restart like under my feet. And of course, when it comes back, it's blank to the desktop. It does not bring back anything I had open. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything in Windows that's, these newer versions? Because again, I've stepped away from Windows for many years and I haven't kept up with like improvements. Is there anything I can do to address this scenario? Because it drives me insane.
So Claudio, I've got a Surface too.
Okay.
A Surface as well.
Okay.
Mine doesn't do that. Have you set it up with working hours? There's a setting where you tell it, okay, these are my working hours. Don't ever restart during that time period.
Okay. I don't think I've set that. I think I've only set it to say, hey, don't ever restart it. Ask me first. I think that was the setting that I chose, but I'll look about the work hours. And even if it does that, right? Even if it restarts after work hours, is there a way to tell it, hey, please bring back the way I had it before you restarted?
That I'm not sure about.
Okay.
To be honest, it doesn't work that great on a Mac for me.
Really?
Well, I mean, it brings some stuff back, but like not like the way Emacs was configured at the time, and and a couple other things. Yeah, and I was like, all right, that's great that you opened up Slack for me, so it's using just as much power as always, but Docker is still not stopped and started running. Slack Emacs is still not like opened and configured properly, and you didn't shut it down with proper layout saved. So it's kind of not that great.
Yes, it depends. It depends on the apps then, because the apps that I use, like of course the web browser, the terminal window. Yeah. If I'm doing like a Ruby on Rails development on the other on the Mac. It brings like RubyMine, and if I had like multiple instances of RubyMine, it brings those back. VS Code, it brings it back, but it's probably then application specific, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's application, like, yeah, it can't reach into Emacs and do stuff, and Emacs doesn't implement anything specific for them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, but like I've noticed that it does that, and it's kind of nice, but it's somewhat limited, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, on Windows, it's like, oh man, come on. I mean, even like, because this is the other thing that's like on the Mac, I use Evernote a lot. Of course, everybody knows that. The notes that I have open, it brings back up as I had. On the Windows, it doesn't do any of that, and I'm like, seriously, that's very, very annoying.
Right.
But, okay, I'll keep researching. All right, that's what I had for today, guys.
And it only took up 51 minutes.
Right?
Yeah. I'll bring. I guess I got a couple things, but if does anyone else have anything to bring up?
So there's one thing that I posted this on our internal Teams thing, and Claudio said we should bring that to Virtual Brown Bag. So, oops, not that. Hold on a second. You don't want an F# AST. What you want is this link that I found, which is really cool.
All right.
There we go. So the neat thing about that is it's just this where you can go and follow these little set of questions to see how much you know about various topics this person put together. They're actually really well done. And there are some topics in here that I know, but I don't have them, at the front of my mind, like core stuff, I only think about that when it's broken. So I found it really helpful to go, this site really helpful. So I thought I'd throw that out there for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's it's very cool that you posted that, and that's why I said, this is totally brown bag material, because 1 or 2 months ago there were like 2 or 3 people who reached me on, I think it was on LinkedIn, saying, hey, yeah, I hear that's the virtual brown bag thing, and I've seen some of the videos, but some of those are really like advanced stuff for me because I'm just getting started. Do you guys have like something that's more like introductory kind of level thing? And when I saw this, like, oh, this would be also great for them as well, besides the rest of us who have been doing this but may not have a good hang on the whole thing. So thanks for sharing it. And I'm saving that to the notes. Make sure to include it in the video. All right, cool. All right. So, George, you said you had something else?
Sure. Oh boy, which of these things do we want to talk about? So, I'll talk about this one since I think everyone on the call right now is a .NET person. So I had an interesting project recently where I was moving an existing database, like that was developed just kind of the way the databases are developed in applications. And they had been using EF migrations, but they hadn't been using so they had been using EF, but not migrations at all. Which is like, come on, man, that's the good part of migrations of EF. Like, yeah, is the migrations are sweet. Like, otherwise, you just use Dapper. But
was there reasoning as to why they were not using it?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah,
okay.
their main guys aren't like super senior, and I know that like, yeah, I actually do know the guy that started the project. I haven't talked to him in a while, and he probably, there was probably some reason or maybe some misunderstanding or something. Okay. But so it was interesting having to figure out a process of getting their existing database into code first migrations. And so I'll kind of explain what I ended up doing, and I'm interested in what other people have encountered, what they think about these approaches. So first of all, we kind of went through and as much as possible grabbed like well, first of all, we did we enabled migrations, right? And then we did add migration to create a basic one. And just to have it auto scan everything that's in the database and then create it into a new database and then did a DB compare of the two. And that kind of showed us like the differences between the tables, which there were plenty. Most of that, it was stuff that needed to get cleaned up. But then from there, like we kind of took the time to clean that up. So adding references or removing references, indexes, and so on. Then, so we got that as close as possible, then created a single migration, which basically did all the tables, and then also all the views that they have, all the stored procedures and functions and everything that they have. And then ran to that, and then again, diffing the entire time. Now you run into interesting situations because there's things that people do in databases when you do that you can't really do in migrations, at least not in all scenarios. For example, links to external databases and stored procedures, especially when there's people like relying on stored procedures a lot. So like there were not only links to other databases that are on the same database instance, which obviously anyone who's trying to recreate it locally, for example, wouldn't have, but also links to like an Oracle database that using their the SQL Server Open Query mechanism, like where there's stuff drawing data out of it. So then that became an interesting exercise in like, okay, first I want to just isolate everything that hits an external thing into its own like schema, right? It's called external. So everywhere where we hit a database, I just create an external database. I just created a pass-through view that was just like, in the external schema and select start from there. And then what I actually ended up doing was creating a very, very simple DSL in C Sharp in the migrations, where you would just say, okay, I want to create a view which selects from this table and selects these columns. And then what I did, and also the columns are of these type, right? And then what I ended up doing is, depending on which build configuration was selected, so if it's like the actual build configuration, okay, generate the SQL for that view. But if it's like a local dev configuration, then generate a dummy view which just like has those columns but no data whatsoever. So just selects where 1 equals 2, right? So that was an interesting challenge to do. And then when it comes time to deploy that stuff, actually launch like we just like, so I run it locally. Like we don't actually want to create a new database and try to move all the data over. That's a little nerve-wracking for them. So, and the databases are the same, so it's probably fine. So we ran the migration, grabbed the actual creation of the migration history table from like part of the script, and just ran that on the actual database. So now when migrations is pointed at the actual database, it thinks that migrations is already run there and can be added on top of it, which is cool. Now the next thing, and we haven't actually implemented this, but I sketched it out for them as a path forward, that happens is you have, the one thing with migrations is when you have this sort of database where they have a lot of stored procedures, well, any change to a stored procedure has to be a new migration, has to be a whole copy of the stored procedure code, which is not how source control really wants to work. Code migrations in general, as great as they are not really how source control wants to work. So one of the processes that I've been kind of putting together for them is like, what you could do is you create all the stored procedures you need once, just as a skeleton thing, so they exist. and then in the migration, and then in the seed itself, like you basically have a bunch of SQL files that that show like here's the current state of what the stored procedure would be. And the seed, you're just pulling those in and running those in the seed itself. And that way you just have one copy of each stored procedure. That's the definitive copy. It's stored in source control. It's right there. One frustrating bit is in SQL Server doesn't have create or alter or replace stored procedure. So like you kind of have to like write that part yourself with like ifs. A pain in the ass, but yeah. So that was an interesting thing to have to do. Yeah, and we're at time.
Oh
Shoot.
yeah. Dang.
Right.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. Okay. I have to jump off, but we can talk about that more later. Bye all.
Do it. All right. Thanks, guys. See you all next week.